What dark secret are you hiding from everyone? Story 1. I've struggled with disordered eating for at least a decade. It comes and goes. I know it's unhealthy, but there's a toxic part of me that loves the feeling of being empty. Several years ago, things were really bad. I was at my lowest weight ever, dealing with brain fog and difficulty breathing. When I started eating again, even a small amount would make my stomach bloat severely. Over the last year or so, I've gained weight, and my depression and anxiety have worsened. My family thinks I don't want to spend time with them, but the truth is, I stayed home because trying on clothes or the thought of being in public made me want to give up completely. It was easier on me mentally to isolate myself. Unfortunately, I can feel myself slipping back into my old disordered eating habits again. Story 2. About 10 years ago, a man broke into my home, or at least that's how it felt. He knocked on the door, and when I answered, he forced his way inside. He started talking about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and tried to extort me, claiming that he and his brothers of doom would kill me if I didn't pay for protection. He was huge, an ex-Navy man if his story was true, completely drunk, his hand bloodied and holding a broken bottle. I was terrified. I told him to leave, but he wouldn't. He became aggressive, so I told him I would blow his brains out if he didn't leave. The problem was, I didn't own a gun. When he refused to leave, I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and slashed at him a few times. He eventually staggered out of my home, seemingly fine apart from some injuries. I assumed he'd survive. A few days later, a neighbor mentioned that a man had been found dead in the area with wounds on his arms. I can only assume he bled out from the injuries I inflicted. Strangely, I was never questioned by the police. There was plenty of blood in and around my house, but I lived in a rough neighborhood where authorities didn't seem to care. The man was apparently a repeat criminal. I killed someone indirectly, and I've never told anyone. Story 3. When I was younger, I lived with my grandmother. Shortly after I turned 18, her health started to decline in a way that made it clear she wouldn't be around much longer. Over the months, I did my best to take care of her, getting her to the hospital when needed and managing what I could. We also had a caregiver who came by daily to help with tasks beyond my ability. What my family doesn't know is that the night she passed away, I was in the living room watching TV. My dog was in bed with her, and I started hearing him whimper and bark. I knew what was happening. I knew that if I acted, I might be able to save her. But I made a choice not to intervene. I didn't want to see her suffer any longer, enduring so much pain and being unable to care for herself. So I let her go before I called anyone. She lived 92 years, and the only regret I carry is that she passed a month after I would have graduated if I hadn't been kicked out of school. She'd been well enough at the time to attend my graduation, and I still blame myself for the foolish decisions I made back then. Story 4. This isn't my secret, but my mom's. And I'm not hiding it from everyone, just from the person it would matter to the most. When my mom was in high school in the 1960s, she had a long-term serious boyfriend named Jimmy. They were each other's first loves, together for years, and planning to get married. When Jimmy went away to college, my mom stayed behind, but they kept their relationship going. Then, the inevitable happened. Jimmy cheated on her and got another girl pregnant. He came back home to break the news to my mom, explaining that since abortion wasn't legal at the time, he had no choice but to marry the other girl. He claimed he still loved my mom and wanted to be with her, but his hands were tied. My mom was devastated. Here's the secret. My mom was also pregnant by Jimmy, but hadn't told him yet. She made the decision to keep it from him forever. Not long after, she told me that she deliberately threw herself down a flight of stairs to induce a miscarriage. Jimmy married the other girl and never found out about my mom's pregnancy. Years later, during the early days of Facebook, my mom reconnected with Jimmy. She didn't have an account, so she asked to use mine to look him up. He was still married to the same woman, and my mom was still with my dad. They exchanged messages for a while, using my account no less, signing off with, "I love you." My mom passed away several years ago, but I still think about the secret I carry. Jimmy doesn't know about the pregnancy, the miscarriage, or how different things could have been if he did. It's not my secret to tell, so I'll never say anything. Story 5. About 2 years ago, my wife, her mom, and I bought a house. From talking to the neighbors, I learned that the family who lived here before us had a daughter who was mixed up with the wrong crowd. Since we moved in, we've had some strange encounters, like one night when a random person knocked on our door claiming they needed gas. Considering we live at the end of a long driveway, it was odd that someone would randomly come to our house for help. I suspect they were looking for the previous occupants. Another time, on a Sunday morning while making pancakes, 4 sheriff's officers knocked on our door. They said they'd received a 911 call from our house that had hung up. We don't even have a landline, so I assured them that neither my wife nor my 2-year-old made the call. They mentioned the name of the previous occupants, and I explained that we had moved in earlier that year. They seemed satisfied and left. One day, while doing yard work, I started chatting with a neighbor. He'd seen the police cars and asked what was going on. I told him the story, and he casually said, "Oh yeah, that family was messed up. The cops were probably being cautious because of the shooting." I was confused and asked, "What shooting?" He looked at me with a mix of sadness and concern and said, "The shooting in your house." Completely baffled, I pressed for more details. He explained that about 2 years before we bought the house, the father of the previous family shot and killed his daughter's boyfriend during an argument in the house. Apparently, the boyfriend was involved in some shady activities, and the father didn't approve. After the incident, the victim's friends terrorized the family for a while, slashing tires, setting off fireworks at night, and causing trouble because the police took so long to press charges. I was shocked. Suddenly, all the strange occurrences made sense. But I just said, "That's crazy. Do me a favor and don't tell my wife or mother-in-law about this. They're already a little spooked by the house, and this would freak them out even more." So here we are. I'm living in a murder house, and I'm the only one in my family who knows. Story 6. In high school, I was the ultimate good kid. Straight A student, loved homework, stayed out of trouble, and was so quiet in class you'd hardly notice I was there. There was this guy in my AP classes who was the total opposite. He was loud and obnoxious, constantly pulling stunts that skirted the line of what teachers would tolerate. Somehow he always managed to maintain just enough plausible deniability to avoid real consequences. We never spoke. Honestly, I doubt he even knew I existed, but I couldn't stand him. Maybe it was the day a girl in class forgot her sweater on a cold day, and he kept loudly teasing her, saying things like, "Damn, it's cold, huh?" while staring at her chest. Or maybe it was the way he manipulated a kid who was likely on the spectrum, pretending to be his friend just to get him to do his homework, only to bully him the next day. Whatever it was, I decided I wanted to make things a little harder for him. At random intervals, sometimes once a week, sometimes once a month or less, I'd do this high-pitched whistle that sounded exactly like a tea kettle. I can make the sound without moving my mouth much, and back then, no one except my family even knew I could do it. Every time, the obnoxious kid got blamed. The teachers assumed it was him and would reprimand him in front of the whole class. He'd protest, but they never believed him. I kept my mouth shut and my grades high, and no one ever suspected me. Story 7. Cutting off my dad was the best decision I've ever made. I hope it eats away at him every single day, not knowing how his only child and grandchild are doing. I tried for years to have a relationship with him, from the time I was 10 until I turned 18. From ages 10 to 13, he would tell me he wished I had died when I was sick as a kindergartner, because then I wouldn't have tattled and ruined his marriage to my mom. Despite all of that, I kept trying to have a relationship with him, for my mom's sake and to help her financially. I'd even visit him for months at a time. When I was 14, he would lock me in a closet for hours. By the time I was 16, he started throwing money at me, thinking it would fix things. But by then, I was already working and didn't need him or his money. I still fight a daily battle with myself, wondering if he was right about me. But when I see my own child, I can't imagine thinking such vile things about them at that age, let alone saying them out loud. Story 8. I am a meth and S addict, and I'm also gay. No one knows this about me. Not my friends, not my family. They see me as the responsible, reliable breadwinner. From the outside, I have my life together. Even during my worst periods of addiction, I managed to secure a new job, earn promotions, and get a raise. No one ever suspected a thing. Before the pandemic, I was addicted to hookups and S, but the isolation of lockdown pushed me to try chems, specifically meth. It spiraled from there. Because of my addiction, I've had countless risky encounters and contracted multiple STIs. Although I was on prep to protect myself from HIV, I still caught gonorrhea, syphilis, chlamydia, and anal warts. The warts were the worst. I had to undergo surgery to remove them, and it was one of the lowest points of my life. I went through the entire process, pre-surgery and recovery, alone, without telling a single person. I thought the experience would scare me straight, but I relapsed several times after the surgery. The operation left my anal canal permanently tight, according to my doctor, which makes analness impossible now. Part of me regrets the surgery because I didn't know this would happen. Another part of me is thankful, as it has forced me to stop engaging in risky hookups. Story 9. My only child, who is 23 years old, has schizophrenia. He was diagnosed about a year and a half ago. He's currently stabilized, but now that he's in a more balanced state, he fully understands the difficult road ahead of him, and it's devastating for him. His father and I are no longer married, but we co-parent well and are doing everything we can to support him. Despite our efforts, my son struggles every day and his pain is palpable. Here's my dark secret. If my son ever followed through on his suicidal ideation, I would completely understand. It would destroy me and his father, but I know he would finally be at peace. That thought, as painful as it is, gives me a strange sense of acceptance. He is my life and my light, but I don't know if medication, therapy, or even love can ever take away his suffering. And as his parent, that is the worst feeling in the world. Story 10. Years ago, a drug dealer I knew asked me to hold on to a package of money for him. He was bad news, selling heroin and coca, and already awaiting trial on his third offense. The authorities were gearing up to put him away for a long time. He figured I was trustworthy since I wasn't involved in the game, and he was right. So I agreed. He handed me a bag of money, $125,000 in $100 bills. It wasn't as much as you'd think in size. Wrapped in rubber bands, the stack was only about 5 or 6 inches thick. Every week or so, he'd ask me to peel off $5,000 and meet him somewhere to hand it over. This went on for months. Eventually, when there was only $10,000 left, he got caught selling while out on bond. This time, they didn't let him out. After he went to prison, his girlfriend kept calling me, demanding the rest of the money. I ignored her. I knew she'd just use it to fuel her addiction. He ended up getting 20 years. 1 month into his sentence, he hung himself. I kept that last $10,000 and never told anyone. Story 11. Not a dark secret, just a sad one. I live in a small town where everyone knows each other or has some connection. I have family and friends, some best friends, some close, some good, and some just acquaintances. But lately, I feel like everyone has forgotten about me or just grown tired of me. They don't include me in gatherings or events anymore, big or small. We used to have a group chat, but after I had a fight with one person, it was never the same. I tried to mend things, but it didn't work. Now I spend most of my time alone. Sometimes they post about their gatherings, and I know they're hiding things from me. I have a private account they don't realize I still follow them with, and they don't hide the posts from that one. It hurts to see them happy without me, pretending I don't exist. I feel lonely and depressed. Sometimes I think about disappearing, cutting ties with everything and starting fresh somewhere else, a place where no one knows me. At least there, I'd feel free. Story 12. No one is probably going to read this, but writing it out might help me. In 2016, my husband died in a horrific car accident. He was 32 and I was 30. We hadn't even been married 2 years, and it was devastating. Our relationship had been rushed, and our time together was tumultuous, to say the least. I spent most of my 20s as a single mom, barely scraping by on minimum wage. But last year, I graduated with my bachelor's degree with high honors. I moved to a new state and got a great job, making 3 times what I ever made before. I can finally go wherever I want and do whatever I want with my child. It's a life I never thought I'd have. The truth is, I wouldn't be here if he hadn't died. If he were still alive, I'd probably still be stuck doing menial work or staying home dependent on him. His death gave me a clean slate, and my life is actually going really well now. The ironic part? I'm working in the industry and position he always dreamed of being in. I'm not thankful he's gone, but I also don't miss him the way people expect me to. Story 13. First, I want to be clear. I'm not a danger to myself or others, and that won't change. But beyond that, I feel like I'm done with life. I've been living with chronic pain for nearly 4 years now. Severe sciatica that's left me disabled. I can't work, but I'm not so disabled that I qualify for help beyond what provincial health care covers. Coming from the U.S. originally, I do understand how significant it is to have health care that won't bankrupt me, and I'm grateful for that. I love my wife and daughters deeply. I want to be here for all their milestones, their good days, their bad days. Really, every single day. I still manage to do most of the shopping and cooking, and I find joy in preparing delicious meals for them. But for myself, I don't have any desires left. My only goal now is to not be a burden to them. Slowly, over the past few years, I've shed all my personal wants and ambitions. I can't bring myself to read books anymore. Watching new TV shows or movies is often too overwhelming. The idea of paying attention feels exhausting. I recognize the desire to watch them, but I rarely follow through. Most of the time, I stick to rewatching shows I've seen or listening to the same bands I've loved for years. Occasionally, I treat myself to something new. In the evenings, my wife and I watch new shows together, and I save my focus for that time. Sharing that with her is worth the effort. The rest of my day is just existing. I know it would break her heart if she knew I felt this way. If there were a solution, I'd take it in a heartbeat, but every possible treatment has been tried. My condition is degenerative, and it's only going to get worse. Still, I have time, and I plan to use it well. I want to ensure I'm a net positive for my family and not just a drain. I may not bring in a paycheck anymore, but there are still ways I can contribute, and I'm determined to do them. Story 14. I have a son. Nobody knows about him except me and his mother. She was a really good friend of mine. Kind, hardworking, but somewhat shy and homely. She had never had a boyfriend and was in her early 40s. All she ever wanted was to be married and have a child. After realizing marriage might not happen for her, she decided to have a child on her own. She saved up $12,000 for artificial insemination, but the first attempt didn't work, and with her teacher's salary, she couldn't afford to keep trying. Time was running out for her dream, so I stepped up. We talked it over and decided the story would be that she got artificially inseminated and didn't know the father. We even went to a lawyer and paid a good amount to legally absolve me of any parental responsibility. To this day, I think of it as a sperm donation, like donating to a bank, only she was the recipient. It only took a couple of tries. Whenever she was ovulating, I'd donate. She got pregnant, and now she has the child she always dreamed of. So technically, I have a son, but to the world, I'm childless, and I'm okay with that. Story 15. This isn't my story, but a close friend's. She decided to try one of those 23andMe DNA tests to learn about her genetic makeup and any potential health predispositions. When her results came back, she noticed a distant relative listed who lived in New York. She assumed it might be some distant cousin she'd never met. Being South Asian, we're both used to having large, sprawling families. A few weeks later, she received a Facebook friend request from a man who shared her last name. He sent her a message saying, "Hi, I know this sounds crazy, but I think you might be my half-sister." My friend freaked out and immediately dismissed the idea. She tried to ignore him, but he and his wife persisted, reaching out on multiple platforms. The man claimed that when my friend's father immigrated to the U.S. in the late 1980s, he had an affair with a woman in New York. According to the man, the father moved to another state before he was born and didn't even know he existed. The man said he took the 23andMe test to confirm his father's identity. He even shared specific details about my friend's father that were accurate enough to make us both believe his story might be true. I convinced her to confront her dad privately. I don't know all the details of that conversation, but I do know her father was shell-shocked and ended up moving out of their house for a while. This happened a few years ago, and everything seems to have smoothed over with her family now, but I don't ever bring it up. Story 16. My daughter isn't biologically mine. I've been with my wife since 2011. In 2018, I relapsed hard and lost everything. She left me, but I got clean, completely turned my life around, and we got back together. Shortly after she was pregnant. We'd experienced 4 miscarriages before, so I took this as a blessing. The first time I held my daughter, she was about a week old, she gave me the biggest smile, a smile just for me. In that moment, I became her dad. Her biological father is a meth addict who's hurt a lot of people. He doesn't even know I exist, though we live within 50 miles of him in the same state. That fact terrifies me. I've been trying to convince my wife to move somewhere far away, but she's hesitant. My daughter is almost 4 now, and soon she'll be able to understand and call me dad. My own parents don't know the truth. I'm especially worried about how my dad would react since my mom kept me away from him for 18 years. It's hard. I work in construction in the Deep South, where raising a child that isn't biologically yours is frowned upon. Sometimes I feel weak or judged. But nothing matters more to me than my daughter. Story 17. When I was in elementary school, a friend from church invited me over to play Barbies. She had a lot of cool accessories, including a tiny toy can of dog food. For some reason, I desperately wanted that toy can. My Barbies didn't even have toy dogs, but the little can represented something bigger to me. It was a piece of a normal life I didn't have. Things like growing up in a family house with marks on the wall measuring your height year after year, instead of moving to a new apartment every time the rent went up. So I stole it. In my childish logic, I thought if I wrote my name on the can, my friend wouldn't recognize it. She had so many toys, I assumed she'd never miss this one little thing. But when she came to my apartment to play, the toy looked completely out of place among my cheap Barbie accessories. She recognized it immediately and asked about it. I lied. She didn't believe me, and that was the end of our friendship. Years later, I ran into her at a club. We had a great chat, but I never apologized for the stupid toy. To this day, I regret not saying sorry. Story 18. I am super lonely. Like cry myself to sleep lonely. My friend group has subconsciously designated me as the punching bag, and I work a customer service job where I'm regularly berated. Between work and friends, most of my time is spent hearing nothing but negative comments, including my own inner thoughts. My dating life has completely fallen apart. Every man I say hi to seems to want nothing to do with me, and I never even find out why. That only adds to my self-loathing. I think I'm a decent person. I think I'm decent looking, but I'm not very interesting. I don't have any real hobbies, so when I'm not going out with friends, I'm just at home alone in complete silence. It hurts that even when I'm with other people, trying to escape my own thoughts by feeding off their energy, I still hear them make fun of me, often about the very things I'm already tearing myself apart over. Everything I say gets picked apart and turned into some kind of insult or joke at my expense. I'm constantly made to feel like I'm stupid or like the court jester. Sometimes I go along with it because I need the laugh. Other times I get melancholy, which just gets me criticized even more. If I were to bring any of this up, it wouldn't go over well. We had a former friend who left the group under similar circumstances, though she also did something terrible to someone. She was very sensitive. And now any complaint I make that resembles something she would have said would lead to comparisons to her, which would be extremely negative. Even though I have friends, many of whom genuinely like me and want the best for me, I still feel incredibly isolated. I feel like I don't have that special connection with anyone. I would love to be in love, or at least have a best friend who enjoys spending time with me regularly. All my other friends either have partners or that one special friend they do everything with. I'm never that person. I'm never the favorite or the go-to. Some days I feel like I'm only invited out so I can be the joke, not because my company actually makes people feel better. I'm not suicidal and I have no desire to hurt myself or anyone else. I'm just lonely. I just want someone to keep me company. I feel like I'm slowly drifting away from the only people I have in my life, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life alone in my apartment, talking to myself. I just want to feel like my presence and my company are truly valued by someone. Story 19. I, 46M, played piano from the age of 5 until I was about 12. When I was around 9 or 10 years old, I started taking lessons at the home of a, in my memory, 30-something-year-old married woman. She was incredibly fun and would transcribe songs I liked into sheet music for me to play. She was, by far, my favorite piano teacher. She ended up being my last piano teacher, but I don't really remember why I stopped playing altogether. I was really into it, and then suddenly I wasn't. My parents, who are wonderful people and with whom I have a great relationship, insist they don't remember her name or why I stopped taking lessons. They just know that I did. Oddly, they seem uncomfortable whenever the subject comes up. I didn't think much of it until I spoke with a friend who is the same age as me. We didn't know each other back then, but he also grew up playing piano and took lessons with the same teacher. He loved her too, but he also stopped going to her around the same time I did and doesn't remember why. His parents, like mine, give similarly vague and evasive answers when he asks about it. I have a hazy memory of going upstairs in her house once. There was this tiny little room off the staircase with a stained glass window that I thought was really cool. The thing is, all the instruments were on the first floor, so there was no reason for me to be upstairs. My friend remembers the same room and window. Story 20. This is nothing compared to most stories, but it's one of those foundational childhood moments for me. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, my grandparents, who raised me and my sister, brought home a seafood dinner from Long John Silver's. I grabbed a package of fried shrimp and devoured it, leaving nothing but the tails. Then my little sister, who was about 7 or 8, asked if she could have some shrimp too. My grandmother told her she had bought a large order for us to share. I panicked, not wanting to get in trouble for eating all the shrimp, so I handed my sister the package with only the tails left. She crunched into the first one, spit it out, and hated shrimp from that moment on. For years, she wouldn't touch shrimp because of that night. I felt so guilty for the next 20 years, convinced I had robbed her of the chance to enjoy something she might have loved. When we were around 28 and 29 years old, she finally tried shrimp again and loved it. I confessed what I had done all those years ago, apologizing profusely, even tearing up a little. She laughed so hard and couldn't believe I had carried that guilt for so long. Now she lives by the ocean and eats shrimp all the time. It's been 35 years since the infamous shrimp tails incident. And while I still feel a tiny bit of guilt, We joke about it now. Story 21. Mine's pretty tame, I think. I'm in my 30s and my conservative Christian family thinks I'm straight. They believe I've only ever slept with 1 or 2 women and that my girlfriend of 4 years is a cisgender woman. The truth is, I'm pretty open-shoely and don't hold to the idea of no S before marriage. I've slept with women, men, trans people, cross-dressers, and even had threesomes. My girlfriend knows everything about me. She's trans, passes well as a woman, and I fully support her in everything she does and who she is. I'll never tell my family any of this, not because they wouldn't take it well, my mom specifically wouldn't, but because it's simply none of their business. I also won't tell them that my girlfriend is trans because she doesn't want anyone to know, and I respect that completely. To everyone else, she is a woman, and that's how she wants to be known, without complications. If the truth ever came out, I'd stand by her 100%. To hell with anyone who has an issue with it, family included. Story 22. My family and friends thought I joined the military out of a patriotic sense of duty in 2003. The truth is, I'd been raped in college a few years earlier when I was 19. Some people know about the rape, but what they don't know is that he filmed it. He told me if I went back to his house, he'd give me the recording and make sure no one ever saw it. When I went back, everything was set up again. Blankets, camera, he raped me again. And when I begged for the tape, he said he'd already sold it online. I was so ashamed. I lost all trust in people. My dad doesn't know the real reason I dropped out of college. He was furious because he paid for my schooling, and my decision to quit effectively ended our relationship. What he doesn't know is that I dropped out after seeing my rapist on campus. I ran back to my car, sobbed, and withdrew from all my classes that same day. A few years later, I joined the military, hoping my death would make sense to people. I fully expected to die in Iraq. I volunteered for every dangerous assignment, wishing to be dead by my 26th birthday. I hated coming home because I had no motivation to live. I kept my distance from people, didn't trust being alone with anyone, and poured all my energy into working hard during my decade in uniform. Ironically, those years in the military were the best of my life. The risk, the structure, and not having to think about my future felt comforting. Eventually, I was medically retired. I'm in therapy now, trying to work through it all. I doubt I'll ever tell my family the full story. Even now, I struggle to envision a real future for myself. Story 23. Around 11 years ago, my cousin and I found a dead body on my grandparents' farm. It was hidden deep in the fields, under a tree. We didn't recognize the man. He was wearing a black shirt, brown pants, and no shoes. His body looked like it had been there for about a day. His skin was grayish-green and swollen, with flies swarming all over him. At first, we just stared in shock. Then, for some reason, we decided to bury him. We were 11 and 12 years old, introverted and a little arrogant, and thought we could handle it like adults. My cousin ran to get a shovel while I stayed with the body. When he came back, we buried the man and even prayed over his grave. Afterward, we decided to play detectives. We searched for clues around the area trying to figure out who he was or how he died. We didn't find anything unusual, and we regretted burying him before checking for any signs of foul play. At first, we planned to tell our family, but we decided to wait and see if there were any reports of a missing person or news about a dead man in the area. We asked around discreetly, seeing if any workers or villagers had seen someone matching his description. No one had. Years passed and nothing ever came up. No missing person reports, no mention of a body. We swore to keep the secret forever, partly because we were too far in and didn't want to get in trouble for not saying anything earlier. To this day, we still visit his grave every time we go to the farm. It's in a secluded spot, hidden from anyone else. My cousin and I occasionally still look for clues about who he might have been. Now, I'm sharing this story anonymously. No one knows the farm, village, or country, so his grave is still safe. Only my cousin, I, and now all of you know about him. Story 24. I have a deep, dark secret that I've been hiding for years. I'm in love with my best friend. We've been friends for as long as I can remember, and over the years, my feelings for them have grown into something much deeper. But I've never told them how I feel because I'm terrified of ruining our friendship. Every time we hang out, I find myself staring at them, wondering what it would be like to be together. I've even daydreamed about our life as a couple. But then reality hits me. They're happily dating someone else, and I could never break them up. Even if they were single, I don't know if they'd feel the same way about me. So I keep my feelings locked away and try to act normal around them. It's hard, but it's the only way I know to protect our friendship. Sometimes I think I should tell them the truth, but the thought of losing them completely terrifies me. What if they don't feel the same way? What if they can't forgive me for keeping this secret? I feel stuck, unable to move forward or let go. I know I need to find the courage to tell them, even if it means risking our friendship. Maybe then I can finally start to heal and find happiness, even if it means losing them in the process. Story 25. I no longer have a dark secret, but 4 years ago I carried one that nearly destroyed me. After being laid off from a job I loved, my finances spiraled out of control. Within 2 months, I maxed out my credit card and turned to payday loans. For 3 years, almost nothing from my paycheck went toward anything but interest. Worse, I was hiding all of it from my wife, convinced she'd leave me if she found out. My dad did the same thing to my mom, racked up debt without guilt and let it keep growing. I, on the other hand, was riddled with anxiety. I felt physically ill about it, even vomiting from the stress, but I was too scared to come clean. Last year, everything came to light when a debt collector illegally obtained my wife's phone number and called her looking for me. She was confused, and I had no choice but to tell her everything. I'm still working on paying off a consumer proposal, but to my surprise, my wife didn't leave me. It took a long time to rebuild her trust, but we're still together. Looking back, I realize how stupid I was for not being honest sooner. The fear of admitting my debt made things so much worse. At one point, 88% of my paycheck was going to interest, and I had to sell my possessions just to pay rent. If your partner truly loves you, they'd rather you be honest so they can help. Don't make the same mistake I did. Be honest before the situation spirals out of control. Story 26. I got my bully and 6 other jerks expelled from my high school, boarding school. This happened 7 years ago. There was this one guy in my class who always found a reason to mess with me. He called me names, publicly humiliated me, and even physically attacked me. He had no real reason to have a problem with me, but he made it his mission to make my life hell. The worst part? No one ever sided with me when I stood my ground because he was one of the cool kids. One night, as I was heading back to my room, I discovered that my door was locked from the inside. Turns out, he and 6 other popular boys were inside, beating the crap out of my roommate. There was a crowd of at least a dozen students watching the scene like it was some kind of entertainment. I decided to mind my own business and head to bed before they turned their attention to me. The next morning, I found out my roommate didn't plan to report the attack to the school administration, but since he went to the clinic to get treated, the doctor reported the incident to the school. The 7 boys were so popular that they managed to get the entire batch of students to agree on a fake story to protect them. We even had a meeting to plan the cover story. That's when I saw my chance. I went straight to the counselor and told them the truth about what happened and how the bullies had organized a fake alibi. When the disciplinary board questioned them, their lies fell apart instantly. By the end of the week, they were expelled and had to leave the school. Everyone was crying and upset because some of the most popular kids had to go. They even held a goodbye party for them. I pretended to be sad, but honestly, I had never felt so happy in my life watching their downfall. Last I heard, my bully is still struggling in a vocational college while I finished my ACCA studies on a scholarship. Wherever you are, I hope you suffer slowly, you piece of Shaw. Story 27. This is a secret that only my mom and I have kept for years, and we've never told the rest of the family. When I was a child, my mom had a bad crack addiction. One night, well after midnight, she took me with her to an apartment on the far side of the city. I think it belonged to the guy she was getting her drugs from, but I don't know all the details. I just remember it being in a really rough neighborhood. At some point, a bad argument broke out. The men there forced my mom and me into a separate room and warned us not to leave. I could hear them arguing, but I didn't understand what they were saying. My mom started panicking and told me we had to get out. She admitted she didn't have the money she promised them and said they were going to hurt us both. She locked the door and pushed furniture in front of it to barricade us inside. Then she told me I had to jump off the balcony. It was only the 3rd floor, but to me it seemed impossibly high. I was terrified, but she convinced me to jump, especially as the men started kicking at the door. Somehow I didn't hurt myself when I landed. My mom followed after me, and then we ran as fast as we could through the neighborhood until we reached a bus stop far from the apartment. We waited for a late-night bus to take us back home on the other side of town. My mom didn't have a car, so it was the only way to get away. After that, my mom sent me to stay with my grandparents for the rest of the summer. She told me never to tell anyone about what had happened, saying the police would take me away and send me to live with my father if they found out. When she came to get me later that year, we were living in a completely different neighborhood. I've never brought this up to her again, and I've never told anyone in the family, but I'll never forget it. Story 28. This happened when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and it's something I've never told anyone until now. My family was in the middle of moving. My parents were driving our minivan late at night, probably around 2 a.m., and my two sisters were in the middle seats while I was sitting in the back. The trunk was packed with boxes of clothes and other belongings, and I was wedged between them. I remember saying I was bored and asking how much longer until we got there. My parents told me to go to sleep, but I wasn't tired, so I just stared out the window. That's when I felt something tapping the back of my shoes. At first, I thought it was just the clothes shifting around, so I ignored it. But the flicking sensation kept getting harder and harder. I started to feel scared, but didn't say anything. Finally, I decided to check under the seat. I scooted forward to put my feet on the ground and looked down. Before I could even glance under the seat, I saw these black, scaly hands with giant claws grab my feet and pull them as if trying to drag me under. I yanked my feet back up, but it happened again, even harder. This time, I fell forward into the seat in front of me. My parents asked what was wrong, but I was too scared to tell them. I just said it was a bad dream. My mom pressed me a little, pointing out that I wasn't sleeping, but I insisted I was tired and pretended to go to sleep. I never put my feet on the ground of that van again. This is the first time I've ever spoken or written about it. I think about it weekly and have for years. I know I wasn't asleep, but I still can't come up with a rational explanation for what happened. I never looked under the seat. I can still feel it. The warmth of those hands on my freezing feet in the cold van, the flicking of my shoes. Sometimes I feel crazy for even remembering it, but I'm 100% sure it happened exactly as I recall. Story 29. My dad was very abusive and always had health issues. The week he died, he needed to go back to the hospital. He was a below-knee amputee, and the doctors decided they needed to amputate the rest of his leg. At the time, I was a freshman in college. I would stay at school all day to study and do homework, but mostly to avoid being around him. I didn't drive, so my mom would drop me off and pick me up. That week, my mom spent the entire day at the hospital with my dad before coming to pick me up in the evening. One night, as we were driving home, we walked into the house and I decided to have a snack. My mom was in the kitchen with me, and out of nowhere, I said, "This is what it would be like if it was just the two of us." It was quiet, peaceful, no yelling, no cursing. That dark energy wasn't suffocating us anymore. That night, I fell asleep in my parents' room with my mom while we watched TV. At 3 a.m., she got a call. My dad had passed away from cardiac arrest. Looking back, I think we both knew, deep down, that my dad was going to die. He had drastically changed in the last 2 weeks of his life. He became kind. He asked me about my life and listened without judgment, something he'd never done before. He stopped getting mad at me. He was nicer to my mom, too. One night, they went grocery shopping, and my mom told me it was the most fun they'd ever had in their marriage. He called a friend to talk about what we did for the Super Bowl, saying, "We had a lovely time." That wasn't like him at all. His final act was making peace with my aunt, his sister. They had a complicated relationship, both cruel and abusive in their own ways. But he called her and said he didn't want to fight anymore. He cried, telling her they were the only family they had left. A few days before he passed, my mom told me she had a feeling he was going to die soon. I told her she was crazy, but the day before he died, I told him I loved him. I never said that to him before. It made me uncomfortable because I was scared of him and hated him at the same time. But something in me made me say it. I've thought about it a lot since, and I think I said it because I didn't want to carry guilt after he died. I thought those words would set me free from his manipulation. I was wrong. Even in death, my father still haunts me. His abuse, his manipulation, his expectations, they're with me every day. I still find myself trying to live up to the image he wanted for me. I still ask myself, what would my dad think of this? But now I'm slowly learning to make the choices that are best for me, not for him. I wished for his death every single day of my life, thinking it would set me free. It didn't. If anything, it feels like he latched onto me even more tightly. It's been almost 10 years since he died, and I'm still crawling away from him. I know he'll always be there, lingering in the back of my mind, but I won't let him hurt me anymore. Story 30. My best friend raped my ex-girlfriend, and I can't talk about it to anyone. She doesn't want anything to happen, so I'm forced to pretend it never happened. The guy doesn't even know I know. He still goes to all the same places I go, and we have the same group of friends. To avoid conflict, I've decided to let it go. But that decision has cost me. I've stopped going anywhere I might see him, which means I barely see my friends anymore. I'm so disappointed in him. But honestly, I'm even more disappointed in myself for keeping this bottled up. My ex has no reason to make something like this up. She gained nothing by telling me. We aren't even close anymore. After it happened, he allegedly blamed me somehow and rubbed it in her face. I wasn't even there. So obviously, something is very wrong with him. I don't care about myself in this situation, but it kills me that he would hurt someone who trusted him. Even if they had consensually fooled around, I wouldn't have cared. But he pretended to be her friend, then preyed on her and assaulted her. That's unforgivable. From what I've gathered, this isn't the first time he's had problems with women. There are whispers, but no one is willing to come forward. I can sense this is bigger than just her. There are probably others who haven't spoken up. I don't know what to do. I want to make sure no one else gets hurt, but I also want to respect her wishes. I feel stuck, not knowing how to handle this in a way that's best for everyone involved. Story 31. I created this account a couple of years ago specifically to tell this story, but only recently managed to write it all out. I was being blackmailed by my elderly neighbor. At first, it was just small neighborly tasks, replacing the starter on his car, helping his wife in the garden, driving him to his doctor's appointments. Normal stuff. Then one day he knocked on my door and told me their collie Samson was getting old and sick. Samson was 14 and had arthritis, incontinence, and seizures, according to him. He said they didn't have enough money to take him to the vet to put him down and asked me to do it. I told him I couldn't afford it either and definitely couldn't do what he was asking. But then he reminded me of the secret he'd been keeping for me and said, "I'm not asking for much, just mercy for Samson." Reluctantly, I agreed. That Sunday, while he and his wife were at church, I took Samson out for what I thought would be a perfect last day. We went for a long drive, stopping for ice cream, a hamburger, and chicken nuggets from McDonald's. I took him to the beach where he swam and played fetch like a puppy. He seemed so full of life. I thought about leaving him there, hoping some kind family would find him, but I couldn't. We drove to a forest about 20 minutes away. We walked a mile in, and I decided it was far enough. Here's where it gets awful. I wasn't a hunter, had never owned a dog, and didn't know much about their anatomy. I had Samson lie down, put the muzzle to his head, looked away, and pulled the trigger. I missed, sort of. I didn't kill him instantly. I maimed him, and I'd only brought one round of ammunition. I panicked and had to finish him off with the butt of the rifle. Shaken, I left without burying him and went home. The next morning, there was a message from my neighbor's wife asking if I'd seen Samson. I went to their house and the neighbor asked if I'd taken care of him. When I said yes, I started to tear up. He put his hand on my shoulder and told me it was all for the best, that Samson had lived a good life and wasn't in pain anymore. Then he admitted he hadn't told his wife what happened. He said he'd rather let her believe Samson had wandered off and might still be out there somewhere. I thought that was incredibly messed up, but I didn't argue. A few days later, his wife stopped me as I was pulling into my driveway. She told me she and her granddaughter had been searching for Samson all over town. She said her husband had wanted to get rid of Samson for years because he hated the dog hair. Then she mentioned that Samson wasn't 14, he was only 5. That's when it hit me. Samson wasn't sick or suffering. He wasn't having one last burst of joy before the end. He was just a happy, healthy dog. My neighbor had manipulated me into killing him simply because he didn't like him. I wanted to throw up. I told her I thought I had a migraine and needed to lie down. I never told her the truth and never spoke to Laurent again. Story 32. My aunt and I have been romantically involved for 10 years. It started when I was 18, just after I graduated high school. That summer, I was heading to a major university in California for college. One night, after a long party, I was exhausted and wanted to go home. My aunt, who was also at the party, offered to drive me since her house was close to my parents' house. We talked for about 20 minutes during the drive. Then, out of nowhere, she slid her hand over my zipper. I was caught completely off guard and shouted, "WTF!" She pulled over, seeing I was in shock, and started to explain. She confessed that she found me attractive. She knew it was wrong, but said she couldn't help how she felt. I was fit, 6 feet tall at the time, I'm 6'4" now, and had been involved in sports, so I guess she found me appealing. She said she wasn't married or seeing anyone and admitted she had been thinking about this for a while. Midway through her explanation, she kissed me. It was my first kiss, and it was passionate. When we got back to my house, we ended up having S in my room. She was my first for everything. After a few days of talking, we decided to keep it a secret. We knew it was wrong, but it felt so right. I managed to convince my parents to let me move in with her, arguing that her house was only 15 minutes from my school compared to 40 minutes from theirs. They agreed, thinking it was purely practical. Once I moved in, we started having sex daily, morning, afternoon, and night. Over time, our relationship became deeper. Now I'm almost 30 and still live with her. I have a job nearby, so staying with her still makes sense to everyone on the outside. No one suspects a thing. We've been a couple for 10 years now, and we want to elope. We know this would tear the family apart, but we're in love and can't help it. She's in her mid-40s, and I don't care about the age difference or societal judgment. As long as no one finds out, we're going to continue being a couple in secret. Story 33. My sister was a nightmare to live with. Violent, destructive, untrustworthy, and intentionally cruel. She was so bad that some of my friends weren't allowed at my house because their parents were afraid of her. My parents, rather than intervene, expected us to sort out our conflicts on our own. That obviously didn't work in my favor. One day, she was being her absolute worst, and I heard the sound of a pill bottle rattling. I knew exactly what she was doing. She had done it before. She was about to take pills and call her ex to tell him what she had done. I went outside and unplugged the phone lines from the box connected to the house. This was before cell phones were common, so I knew she couldn't make the call without the landline. My hope was that if she couldn't call her ex for attention, she would just go through with it, and the nightmare she created for everyone would finally be over. Then I went for a walk to clear my head. Apparently, I didn't act quickly enough. She managed to make the call before I cut the line. Her ex called 911, and soon I heard sirens approaching. But instead of feeling relieved, I felt disappointed. When questioned about the disconnected phone line, I played dumb. I said we had been fighting, and I cut off her call just to annoy her. I didn't mention the pills. My parents bought my excuse, and that was the end of it. Decades later, I still don't feel bad about what I tried to do. I've thought about what could have happened if she had gone through with it, and honestly, I'm not all that bothered. I'm not a monster, and I don't take what I did lightly. But my sister brought so much misery and trauma to everyone around her for years afterward. I have no idea where she is now, and I don't care. Story 34. I was raped. I passed out from blood loss and hyperventilation. At the time, I had been dating my boyfriend for 3 months. His dad was out of town on a weekend trip to a neighboring state, and I knew his dad would have been furious if he found out my boyfriend had someone over while he was gone. But that night, I couldn't stop myself from spiraling. I was stuck in a panic attack for hours, unable to calm down. I finally realized I couldn't do it alone, so I called my boyfriend. When I told him what had happened, he didn't hesitate. He told me to pack a bag because he was coming to get me. He didn't care about the potential consequences from his dad. He only cared about making sure I was safe. When I got to his house, he made me feel safe in a way I had never experienced before. His bed was small, barely big enough for one person, but he didn't care. He hugged me, made me food, and stayed by my side. We sat in his bed watching movies, and when I asked him to stay with me, he didn't even hesitate. That night, he slept beside me because I needed him there. He's the only person who truly knows the more gruesome details of what happened to me that night. I've told some close friends here and there that I was surely assaulted, but even on here, none of you will ever know everything I went through. Only he knows, and I will love him forever for the way he cared for me. He made me feel safe when I thought that was impossible. Story 35. I feel you, man. I went through the same thing last year with my mom. She was only 58 when she got cancer for the second time. The first was breast cancer, and the second was uterine cancer caused by complications from the first treatment. The second time hit her hard. She deteriorated quickly, to the point where all she could do was sit in a chair, tubes and bags connected to her intestines. We had to feed her little icicles because her mouth was always dry, and she couldn't eat. Any movement caused her immense pain, and near the end, she couldn't even talk, just weakly groan in agony. We were lucky to be with her the night she passed. My family, along with some of her siblings, were there. I almost wasn't, though. I'd planned to go back to school to grab some things and stay there for the night. But at the last minute, I decided to stay, and I'll always be grateful for that. Watching her go through that was unbearable. The image of her suffering is seared into my memory. But even in all that pain, she never complained. Not once. She was constantly praying for us, saying she was offering up her suffering cheerfully for our sake. I know how awful it is to see someone you love in that much pain. In those moments, all you want is for it to end so they can finally be at peace. But looking back now, I realize that time was precious. It was her final marathon, the last stretch of her life. I gave everything I could to her in those moments, cheerfully, lovingly, just as she had always done for me throughout her life. And now, 1 year and 17 days after her passing, I'd give anything to spend one more day with her, even if it was during that time when she was so sick. If you're going through this, I'm praying for you, even if prayers aren't your thing. It's a gut-wrenching experience, and it takes an immense amount of strength to love and care for someone in the way only their child can. You've got this. Finish strong for her. Story 36. For the past 2.5 years, I've been helping my mom take care of 3 kids that aren't mine, while my sister runs the streets. I've sacrificed some of the most important years of my life, the years I was supposed to grow, develop, and set up my future. Instead, I had to grow up too fast and step into the role of raising babies. My mom agreed to take on these kids. I didn't. Yet here I am, stuck in the house every day, stressing and taking care of them while my mom works 12-hour shifts. I'm basically a stay-at-home mom now. I do everything: cooking, cleaning, and caring for the kids. Meanwhile, I'm trying to attend online school, but I can barely keep up with my work because of all the responsibilities. Financially, my mom provides for them, but she's put all the day-to-day responsibilities on me as if I'm the one who had these kids. I've missed out on going to university, despite having scholarships to multiple schools, because I had to settle for online classes. I've turned down job opportunities because they conflicted with my mom's schedule, or because she'd pick fights over petty things, making me feel like it wasn't worth it. I've sacrificed so much. There aren't many people who would take care of kids that aren't theirs, let alone 24/7. And yet, my relationship with my mom has been deteriorating. She gets mad at me over the smallest things and constantly argues with me. I begged her to help me with basic things like getting a license, a job, or a credit card. And while she promises to help, she never does. It's been 3 years of asking, and I have nothing to show for myself. Meanwhile, my sister, the kid's mom, comes and goes as she pleases. She's stolen over $3,000 from my mom, damaged her car, called her names, even called the police on her. Yet my mom continues to let her in the house and enables her behavior. I, on the other hand, get belittled for everything, despite stepping up out of the kindness of my heart. I love my mom, my sister, and these kids, but I'm at my breaking point. I can't keep enabling this cycle by staying. I've expressed how mentally drained I am, but they dismiss me, saying I'm overreacting. Kids aren't for everyone, and I've learned that the hard way. I will never put myself in this position again. I'm 21 years old. I shouldn't have to ask for permission to leave or be scared to make my own decisions. But I feel stuck. I want to leave and disappear from everyone, but I don't know how. These past 3 years have cost me so much. I could have been in a completely different place by now. I'm considering therapy to get my mental health and anxiety under control because I can't keep living like this. None of my close friends know about this. I've lied to people about having a job or a license out of embarrassment, but I'm done. I'd rather struggle on my own and love them from a distance. Story 37. When I was a kid, we lived next to an elderly man named Norm. He was probably in his late 70s, a bit of a loner, but a kind guy. He lived alone and was always willing to help us out. For example, he used his drill press to make holes in our coconuts whenever we asked. My dad often helped Norm with work around his house to make things easier for him in his old age. They had a pretty good relationship. At the time, I had 2 friends, and we were at that age where our parents gave us a lot of freedom. My friends were going through a phase of minor theft, shoplifting candy or small toys. One day they came over and we decided to check out what Norm was up to. We wandered around his property and ended up in his shed. He wasn't home, so we just looked around and then left to go for a bike ride. The next day, Norm confronted my dad, accusing my friends and me of stealing some cassette tapes from his shed. My dad got really angry at him and defended me, adamantly denying the accusations. He was so upset that he stopped helping Norm altogether, and their relationship never recovered. Here's the thing, we did steal those tapes. I don't know why, but we took them, rode down to the local creek, and dumped them. It was completely pointless. But because of that incident, my dad and Norm's friendship fell apart. Norm passed away a few years later, and no one came to his funeral. The worst part is, I think my dad knew we did it. My parents were going through a divorce at the time, and I think my dad wanted to show me he was on my side in his own way. But looking back, I wish he had just yelled at me and told me what I did was wrong. It's been almost 15 years, and I still haven't talked to my dad about it. Norm died alone because of something so stupid, and that guilt has stuck with me ever since. Story 38. My dad was very abusive and had ongoing health issues. The week he died, he needed to go back into the hospital. He was a below-knee amputee, and the doctors had decided they needed to amputate the rest of his leg. At the time, I was a freshman in college. I stayed at school all day, focusing on homework and studying, but mostly avoiding being at home with my dad. I didn't drive back then, so my mom would drop me off and pick me up from school. She spent her days at the hospital with my dad, but that night, she picked me up so we could go home together. When we got home, I put my stuff down and went to the kitchen for a snack. My mom was there too, and out of nowhere I said, "This is what it would be like if it was just the two of us." For once, the house felt peaceful. No yelling, no cursing, no heavy, dark energy. That night, I fell asleep in my parents' room while watching TV with my mom. At 3 a.m., we got the call. My dad had passed away from cardiac arrest. Looking back, I think my mom and I both knew, even if we didn't say it out loud, that he was going to die. In the last 2 weeks of his life, he changed so drastically. He became kind, asking about my life without judgment and listening to my problems without getting mad. He treated my mom better too. One night they went grocery shopping together, and my mom said it was the most fun they'd had during their entire marriage. He even called a friend to say we had a lovely time watching the Super Bowl, a phrase so unlike him. His final act was reconciling with his sister, my aunt. They had always had a complicated relationship. They were so alike, same attitude, same cruelness, same abusiveness. But he called her, told her he didn't want to fight anymore, and cried, saying they were the only family they had left. My mom told me she had a feeling he was going to die soon. I thought she was being dramatic. But the day before he died, I told him I loved him. It was the first time I ever said it. And it made me uncomfortable because I was scared of him and hated him at the same time. Yet something inside me made me say it without hesitation. I think I said it because I didn't want to carry guilt when he died. I thought it would free me from his manipulation, but it didn't. I'm not free of him. He's still with me every day, and so is the PTSD. I still try to live up to the image he wanted for me, but I'm slowly breaking free. I know he'll always be a presence in my life, in every decision I make. I still ask myself, what would my dad think of this? But I've decided to make decisions that are right for me, not for him. I wished for his death every day because I thought it would free me from him. But instead, he latched on even tighter in my mind. It's been almost 10 years since he died, and I'm still crawling away from him. But no matter how long it takes, I know I'll never let him hurt me again.